One of Nurgle's strengths is their ability to take a lot of reasonably fast, reasonably high mass units, and you wouldn't necessarily expect them as like a fast rush faction necessarily, just given their kind of faction lore, but the ability to combine Plague Toads with spawns here, which Cool Umbrella has done in this absolute Nurgle girthquake of a build here. He's got quite a few of each, so let's go ahead and take a look here. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 Plague Toads and 4 spawns, so that's 8 big heavy mass units that are sort of in the mid-tier cost range, maybe arguably up to elite tier. Not quite for the spawn, I don't know. You guys discuss that in the comments. But we also got Nurglings, which regular infantry speed, but they're not like slow infantry speed necessarily. Marauders are also reasonably quick, all of which will help close the distance against this Skaven build here, which has plenty of long-range damage and short-range damage in the form of these Globadiers here. Looks like we've got 3 of them. Anipubo Sharpshooters. It gets Zap Zap. Interesting choice. You don't see it super often, but can be very good if you getting good contact on like a caster or something, increasing those cooldowns. Clan Rat Spears, protecting the back. Regular Warp Lightning Cannon as well. Skaven Slaves as a meat shield. We've got some Warp Fire Throwers to help burst through Nurgle Chaff. Deathmaster Snitch leading the way, an Assassin, and a Plague Priest up on his Furnace. You would think Nurgle would have just immunity to this damage, or that it would actually buff Nurgle troops, but alas, they will be decayed by it in a reasonable fashion, although the damage isn't great from these guys. But yeah, let's see how they do. The Nurgle force is going to be led by Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Nurgle. Nice and cheap, allows this big, wide army. It's got Fleshy Abundance and Rancid Visitations, which is quite a good single-target damage spell these days, especially if we're going after a character like Snitch, who has relatively low HP, but good melee defense and like physical resistance and stuff. Lots of things to help him survive. But you see those Warp Fire Throwers opening up as the Nurglings advance. The Poison Wind Globes as well. Just all the illness and death and decay. And yeah, I mean, Skaven certainly have a lot of associations with plague and disease, right? Which is what makes this matchup particularly fun in my eyes. Oh man, yeah, those Warp Fire Throwers, especially against the demonic units, because they also count as magical fire damage, absolutely melting through multiple units of the Toads as they try and push through the center. The spawns are having a little bit more success. They're actually kind of hanging back right now, letting the initial load kind of be dispensed from the Skaven's weapons teams. But the thing is, there's enough volume of mass here from Nurgle that despite taking horrific losses, they're still able to close the distance with some of these high mass units, start to burst down the weapons teams, disrupt them heavily. Toad's animations are just fantastic for that. Send unit models scattering all over the place. We're in for a grand old time. And yeah, both the flanks, Nurgle has quite a bit of success here in terms of using the Plague Toads and the spawns to be able to actually get on important units. Also getting some good support from the Marauders and the Nurglings out there on the flanks, and starting to close down. In the center, things went very badly for Nurgle, but that's okay. There's a handful of very tattered unbreakable spawn helping to hold the line. Let's see here. Spears moving in, maybe a little bit late, but better late than never. Certainly these reinforcements regrouping here. The Skaven Slave should be able to block. Keep it gets Zap Zap online for a little bit longer. Needs to focus on the Lord here, try and prevent him from casting spells as much as possible. Keeping that cooldown up. I think if he's in the middle of a longer cast time too, it might actually interrupt his cast, but it looks like, yeah, Snitch gets nuked there and routed off. His low armor also is not great when he's getting circle beaten by spawn, certainly can take quite a bit of damage eventually. But Nurgle's speed and poison in combination here is enough to make the Skaven definitely hurt. Without that Scurry Away passive, a lot of these Skaven units are not going to be fast enough to escape, and even with that Scurry Away passive active, like if you take a look at these Skaven Slaves here, 40 speed, pretty good, but it's certainly not fast enough to avoid the 65 of the Plague Toads, or, you know, Spawn coming in here rocking 42, maybe, yeah, definitely with their charge animation would be able to catch them, but obviously don't want to be spending time necessarily chasing, routing Skaven Slaves if you can avoid it, but just as an example, right? Nurgle's poison gives them a speed advantage here that might not necessarily be expected. But Skaven are a decent way ahead on the balance of power, despite what the battlefield situation may have you believe. And a lot of that comes down to Its Plague Furnace still being quite healthy. It's got quite a bit of HP, and again, the AoE drain damage is not fantastic these days. The Billowing Death actually is one of the lower DPS kind of Mortis auras, if you will, in the game, but still is a decent single entity, gives that discouraged effect, and that drain over time will start to tell a little bit of damage. Also has, of course, spells, so that's going to be helpful in terms of keeping up some summoned clan rats here to keep bodies on the field, make sure they can at least operate some of these weapons teams. Even a few Poisonwind Globadiers are very dangerous, and look at Zap Zap somehow online despite all of this inundation by plagued Nurglites. But let's see here. Yeah, one, up two spawn, actually four, chasing some warp fire throwers out there in the distance. Absolutely fantastically cost effective. And loss of Snitch is going to make, oh no, he's not quite lost yet. He's hiding here in the woods. It'll be nice for Skaven's leadership, but regardless, they're starting to get some shatters. These units have just taken too much abuse at the hands of the heavy boys. The heavy boil boys. Sounds like a nice Nurgle boy band, to be honest. Yes. Fantastic. Game looks beautiful as ever. A little bit of flickering on this map if I zoom in like super close, so I'm not going to do that too much, but yeah, the Plague Furnace definitely gets some nice value here, and the fact that it has support units still to work with, but I mean, all these clan rats are costing magic, and over time that will start to wear down. Not an infinite number of summons for the Plague Priest to fight on top of, so it needs to try and preserve some units, real units if it can, but there's really just not a lot in this local area. I mean, Poisonwind Globes do manage to murk those Marauders pretty heartily. That said, Chaos Sorcerer Lord decides to just get it done himself, move into melee here. Certainly the combat stats afforded to a caster of Chaos will enable him to do quite well in that sort of a mop-up engagement. But let's see, in the late game, if he has enough HP, he could definitely help deal with these single entities as well. And we are starting to move towards that phase. Let's take a look here. Snitch is back in action, back in black, if you will. And it's going to be catching those Nurglings. Honestly, might have just popped his concealment bombs and tried to go up and around and avoid those Nurglings, because he really shouldn't be bogged down here. Instead, he wants to try and fight with these three single entities in a blob if he can. I at least in my opinion. He probably is going to be able to break those Nurglings relatively quickly, so it probably won't matter a lot in the long run. Nurgle didn't try and press in with the Sorcerer Lord here to try and get in any kind of single entity engagement here. Let's fast forward a little bit as Nurgle tries to mop up some remaining units. Warp Lightning Cannons trying to get back online, but there's some Marauders and spawns there to prevent that from happening. One pretty much full health unit of Marauders is also here, but notice how Cool Umbrella doesn't necessarily just yellow them directly in. He's going to stick with supporting units as much as possible, although his Lord does get a little bit singled out there. Certainly is fast enough. Ooh, looks like a nice Rancid Visitations there as well. Trying to take down that Plague Priest. Does counter with the Scrying Stone. Gives him some nice damage resistance. I don't believe that's a one-time use. Very nice ability to make the already reasonably tanky Plague Furnace an even tankier option to bring. Honestly, not something you see a ton these days because, again, the damage is not what it used to be. It used to be, at least I'd have to double check. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but I think before it was the same as the Mortis engine itself, which these days it is not. But column of sickly Marauders moves in here, screening nicely, letting the Sorcerer Lord avoid taking too much damage from the Deathmasters, unified with his Assassin Bro. While the Plague Furnace supports these Clan Rat Spears. We've got a handful of remaining Poisonwind Globes trying to get out of the way. Nice block of the charge there for the most part. Will any of these spawn be able to get through? Oh, it looks like a few of them actually do get through. And all it takes is them making contact potentially here to route those Poisonwind Globes, but managed to pressure the globes, rather, all the way around. I do get one little volley there into the Marauders, which is not going to do a ton of damage. They've lost a lot of models at this point, so the explosion damage itself is not as impactful. Damage over time, of course, is what it always is. It's not, well, not always. It used to be quite strong, but you know what I mean. It does the same damage regardless of the number of unit models left in the unit. Unlike the actual missile attack itself, Snitch throws his little blade wind there. It's going to do some nice AoE damage to the remaining Marauders and significantly hinder their leadership. A little Plague Breath as well, so Skaven really just going all in as much as they can to try and win here, but one more Rancid Visitations, and that's likely to finish off the Deathmaster. The sigils popped on the Sorcerer Lord, Weeping Blade, as the Assassin moves in there. Yeah, the Assassin, though, honestly, in terms of a melee combatant, I mean, the Sorcerer Lord's got 49 melee defense, 53 melee attack, decent weapon strength, 100 armor. Again, no pushover. 2v1, it's going to be a little bit trickier, so if you can avoid fighting the Assassin with Furnace together, that would be ideal. Of course, from the Skaven's perspective, they need to keep those two together as much as possible, but it looks like the Sorcerer Lord's going to go chase down the Deathmaster, which is ultimately the right call. If you can actually kill him, it's going to inflict a greater leadership penalty on the Skaven army, although it is going to take some time to do. So, let's see if the Sorcerer Lord, I don't know if he's actually going to be able to catch Snitch is the thing. Snitch is quite swift, and a heavy cavalry lord. I mean, 78 speed for the Chaos Sorcerer Lord is pretty decent, but nope, was not able to actually catch him. Now has to return. One of those Marauders gets massacred in the meantime. So it comes down to this final engagement. Sorcerer Lord and his Marauders against the remaining leadership. Of course, who's to say that the Assassin and the Plague Priest didn't scheme this up to try and, replace the Deathmaster, which is a very foolish thing to do, but still. Considering the Deathmaster lived, don't think it worked particularly well, but regardless, it's still going to be a close engagement here at the end. We'll keep the health bars up so you guys can see what's going on, but almost immediately the Marauders are just dying. The Kundalini army ability is going to be used on them as a desperate all-in heal. Also, restoring their vigor, unfortunately, is not enough to keep them in the fight. Clanrat Spears do rout those, so on both sides, the single entity support is gone. It's just going to be 2v1 here, these two remaining. And normally a 2v1 engagement, I would say the two are almost always going to win. It's always granted with single entity engagements chance game, right? There's a lot of randomness involved to these dice rolls, but certainly you stack things much more in your favor having 2 versus 1, and we'll see how it ends up playing out here. I don't know, the Nurgle Sorcerer Lord has a decent amount of HP left. Looks like he's almost finished off the Plague Priest, and if he does manage to finish off the Plague Priest, then it becomes a 1v1, and again, he's in a much better position to beat because of his armor and his remaining HP, in a much better position to beat the Assassin. He actually just knocks him down by poking him there. Must have been quite the thrust. Marauders come back, the Clan Rats come back, and one more little micro engagement here. Finish this off. Ooh, a little bit of nasty flickering there. Yeah, I don't know why some snow maps in particular have some pretty severe flickering issues, and I really wish Creative Assembly would address that. But Assassin, it's going to pop the Assassin's Trophy. Obviously, that'll help significantly nerf the stats. Sorcerer Lord down to 34 melee defense still, though. I mean, very solid with that active. I guess was that a little bit extra buffed up from Cloud of Flies, so yeah, Cloud of Flies recharges in melee. But ultimately, the Marauders just beating out the Clan Rats actually probably matters a decent amount here in the fact they're able to win the support battle. That gives them, army losses. So, quite the close game there at the end. Balanced Power had some pretty wild swings back and forth. And honestly, but really well played to both players. It was quite the scrap, I must say. And I like this build a lot from Nurgle for facing Skaven. It just gives you a lot of options for, getting in there. Again, some of these units get blasted on the approach. Some of them do not. They're able to get in and land, get some value, and that's kind of by design. It's just present so many targets that Skaven can't possibly burst through everything fast enough. The Marauders definitely get some really nice value supporting. One in particular, 173 kills, 600 damage value. It's excellent for such a cheap unit. Same thing for these Nurglings as well, 500 and 500 out on the flanks. The center ones just got destroyed, but again, kind of by design. Rancid Visitation's also pretty impressive. Again, it's lower HP Skaven characters. They're pretty ideal targets for something like that, but still, it's pretty impressive for that spell. It gives you another option for Nurgle that you don't have to rely on, yeah, certain things to kill single entities, and especially like single entity infantry heroes. I don't know. I don't feel like that was necessarily a weakness for Nurgle before, now that I stop and think about it. I'm not an expert by any means, but anyway. For John FB, the Assassin, super cheap, also extremely cost-effective. The Plague Furnace also is pretty decent here. I might have to give these guys another look and start including them again in my Skaven builds. They're really quite good. Yeah. Just in general. Interesting with these long-range tools here. I mean, Natty Bubo's Sharpshooters is quite good. They pretty much pay for themselves. Warp Lightning Cannons, not quite. Globes, of course, are always going to be good. Excuse me. Warp Fire Throw is very impressive, although they don't actually quite pay for themselves. Burst damage of getting through chaff, I guess tactically that goal was accomplished. Clan Rat Spears here, 700 in support against the spawns and the toads. I don't know. In hindsight, obviously, you want to take more of them. You can't necessarily always predict the Nurgle build here, but like Knights are probably a pretty good bet in this matchup as well, or some kind of high mass units to get in your backline. Hounds even. Which don't count as large, but still, I'd probably maybe take, yeah, definitely take a couple more spears here, likely, if I were to play this from the Skaven side. Not really sure myself, but anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.